Welcome to episode 77 of the XRM Toolcast. In this episode, we talk about the unmanaged active layer bulk remover and the managed solution bulk remover. So lots of words here, but basically, if you've ever had to try to remove a first-party solution that has lots of solution dependencies, or maybe it's a whole lot of third-party dependencies that you've had, then you definitely want to listen to that. And if you ever had an instance where you've deployed a managed solution to another environment and it just isn't working, and then you finally figure out, oh, you've got a active layer, unmanaged layer that's sitting on top of your managed layer, and you need to remove it, boy, these are the tools for you. So we speak to the creator of it, Maciej Kornacki. He is a technical expert in Dynamics 365 CE and .NET. He's responsible for solution architecture and delivery in technical streams of enterprise projects. He also manages teams of onshore and offshore developers, codes in C# and JavaScript, migration, integration, and reporting expert as well, and designing and delivering successful software solutions followed up with great customer recommendations. Normally I give that intro in the actual episode itself, but I forgot, so I figured I'd give it now. So if you want to learn more about removing the either managed solutions or unmanaged layers, then sit back and relax, because this is definitely the episode for you. Let's get started. Hello and welcome to another episode of the XRM Toolcast. With me, your host, Daryl, always raising the bar, and Scott. I got the sweatshirt jacket memo. And what are these? We're both wearing a little jacket sweatshirt thing today. So, because it's not really a jacket, because I think jacket being something that's like waterproof, but it's like sweatshirt material. So what do you call it, Scott? What is it?
Well, what I'm wearing a hoodie.
It's a hoodie.
I mean, yeah,
hoodie with a zipper. Is that different though?
I don't know. I think the same thing. In the UK, they banned hoodies a while ago in shopping centres.
I'm thinking of sweaters. Sorry,
jumpers in the UK. Yeah,
there's a sweater. Sorry.
Okay. Sweater. Yeah, sweater. You just sweaty in, and that's not particularly pleasant. So tend to. But I still kind of snigger when people talk about sweatpants in North America, because in the UK, pants are an entirely different thing.
Yes. Are they sweat pantalones? What are they in the UK?
What do you think? I'm like from the Victorian age or something?
I've never been to the UK. I don't know these things. You're my insight into the UK world, Scott. Maybe our listeners too. Who knows?
Yeah,
You're representing all.
Yeah, we're all living like under Queen Victoria still. That's still what it's like. No, but no. Well, let's go with sweatpants and hoodies. They're yes, comfortable. Okay. It's a comfy day.
It's a comfy day. It's cool. It's cooled off quite a bit. So it's supposed to be like 30 degrees while we're next week. So yay. Anyway, this is not the Weather Channel. Don't tune in for the local news forecast. But they do tune into tools. And we have a special treat today. The first time we've actually been able to, at least I met him, but our guest today is Maciej Kornacki. Is that how you pronounce the last name? Kornacki?
Yes, Maciej Kornacki.
Kornacki? Okay. All right. Kornacki. All right. More Polish like. Okay. I gotta get that down. My brother married a lady she moved from Poland when she was 10. And so every now and then she brings over some Polish treats. So I feel like I have some sort of connection with Polish culture, but very little. And pronouncing it, I'm not very good at it at all. So anyway, Maciej, thanks for joining our show. You've got two tools that are very similar. One of them caught my eye on LinkedIn. You posted, and that's the managed solution bulk remover, and then you also have the unmanaged layer remover. So these are two similar tools that have been that are fairly new. What was the first one you created? When did you do that?
The unmanaged layer remover was fast. It was last year. I don't remember exactly when. And the managed bulk remover is something I created like 2 or 3 months ago.
2-3 months ago.
Fairly new thing.
So these are baby tools in the XRM toolbox world here. Naming, I mean, it makes sense to me, Scott, what they actually do. But for some of our listeners, maybe they don't know kind of what they would do. So, Maciej, do you want to go through like what would be the use case? I guess we have to kind of describe a little bit what's the unmanaged layer versus the managed layer potentially, and then when you'd use one versus the other and why you do that. Can you give us that little level set there of what they are for and how they work in that sense?
Sure. So yeah, the naming is very descriptive, but it's not very pleasant. It was actually the code name when I was creating a Visual Studio project, and it sticks. But yeah, well, basically the first one. So the unmanaged layer remover is the tool which does exactly what it says. So it removes unmanaged layers. Basically, when we have managed solutions in the system, and we have people who customize some components on top of them, which is fine in dev usually, but not necessarily and not always in other targets instances. We start having unmanaged layers on top of different components. And now Microsoft allows us to delete those unmanaged layers, which we know was not always the case. So it's very, very good. The problem so the usual symptom of those unmanaged layers is when we import the solution without overriding customizations. So if we use patches or we just import the solution without overriding customizations, then we sometimes have components which it seems didn't import. So the import of the solution didn't take any effect for the component, and that usually is because there is already unmanaged layer. So when we customize something, like for example a form, well, that might be obvious for majority of us. I don't know if you want to go into the detail, but I think that's basically the core of the problem. So when someone just opens the form in the old editor and just click save button and does nothing, it already creates a managed layer. And if we import another version of the solution, managed solution, on top of our solution, this form will not be updated, right? If we tick the override
unmanaged layer
customization,
wins basically. Right?
it basically like freezes the layering and creates a managed layer, and this layer is what we see later. If we import with overriding customizations, obviously what the platform does is basically overrides the managed layer with another managed layer, based on the new layering. But that's not ideal, especially when it comes to patches. Or some DevOps, right? Sometimes you just import. Sometimes we even want to have this layering, and we don't want to have the override customization. So basically, very often we have this unmanaged layer, and it's not intended. And deleting this is possible from many components now. Microsoft is extending the list. But it's not quick, right? So you have to open in the Solution Explorer every single component, right click it, wait until it deletes, and then go to the other. So it's a very convenient to actually have a tool which you just run and it just leave it overnight or over 2 nights or whatever is the number of your components. Usually not that long. And
so this is the big time saver part of it, right? Like, so if you've got 5 forms and they've edited every single form accidentally, let's say you're on purpose, but lots of time it could be very accidental. Oh, I'm in the wrong org. I didn't think about it, and I'm editing in the wrong org. I've now created this unmanaged layer. Crap! I need to I need to undo that, or I like to undo that. And so you just open up the tool and pick. Is it the active solution you pick, or is it the default solution you pick to remove it from?
No, so the way I actually did it, I'm not saying it's the best approach actually, but this worked for me. So you select a solution like a container of the components you want to scan, right? So you can open your main solution where you actually do the development, and then it will scan for all of the components inside your solution. Because going through the default solution is painful. I think there is also other XRM toolbox add-on which also does the same thing, but it uses a bit different approach where you actually have to select what you want to. I think you just you select solutions and then it checks if there are any unmanaged layers, something like this, a bit different approach. But instead, I decided to do it like a bulk remover. So it iterates through all of the components, and then if there is something to remove, it removes that. Otherwise, it just ignores and goes to the next. So you are not deciding which component exactly. The way you decide is actually you select the right solution. So you can create unmanaged solution just to add your components that you are interested in to limit the scope. And then you run it. The other thing that I did a bit differently to the original solution that was, or the add-on, is that, the list of components which Microsoft supports as, for which it supports the active layer remover, removing feature, it grows, right? The list grows. And I didn't hard code a list of components that it works for. Instead of that, I just added all components which exist by all components types from SDK, and allowed user to select which ones you want to limit for, right? And if that list grows and no one manages, works at the solution further, the list will be bigger. But by default, I just selected those that were supported when I was creating it. So just
that's
left
really
it very
cool.
flexible. Yeah, actually, it was very, very funny with this solution because I was approached by my colleague asking me about this tool at work at the bank. I said, well, why actually are you using this? Well, because Microsoft told me that's the tool to do it. I said, well, if Microsoft suggested, then it might actually be needed.
I think that's a pretty good seal of approval then. If Microsoft support is saying,
I thought that actually no one's using it, but well, Microsoft uses it.
And you can bet that if they're telling one customer to do it, they're probably telling other people to use that tool as well.
I actually really regret I didn't include those app insights or some other, telemetry. I didn't want to do the IL merge and so on. Just designed to do it, but yeah, it will be useful to know if actually anyone's using it.
So tell us a little bit about how you use it yourself. Do you use it on production systems, or is it primarily, you're using it in a place where someone is doing some customizations in, like a SIT or QA or development environment where they really shouldn't have been doing because you wanted to make sure that there's a solid managed layer there? What kind of scenarios do you find you use it for?
You can, and yeah, well, I use it everywhere. It doesn't matter if it's prod or not. Depends where I need to use it. Well, obviously in bigger established projects, you usually don't have some problems in prod. So it usually is SIT, it usually is UAT. Well, I'm not using it, every day, obviously. I just needed it for a couple of scenarios. But yeah, you can use it everywhere. I don't think, it's tested. And all it does is literally iterating through solution components and invoking the SDK action to remove unmanaged layer. That's it. So,
I can think of a lot of scenarios where it's people have been into SIT, QA, UAT type environments where you're importing managed solutions through DevOps kind of cycles, and somehow somebody's decided, you know what, I don't quite like that. I'm going to go and make a change. So like the scenario you gave about the form, that's a classic scenario. And then it's like, well, we've made a change and it hasn't been updated. It's like, well, why hasn't that been fixed in the tester's report that it's still broken? The bug fix that was deployed is still not working. You're like, and then lo and behold, you go in and you find out that someone's made that change, and it's like,
Yeah, it takes time, to find it, to find, why is that? Well, if usually you know what the problem is, but you need to check for all of the components, stuff like this. So I think sometimes it's easier just to run it on top of the whole solution, leave it overnight, and clean it, and then that. Well, at least you don't have to recreate the SIT instance or UAT instance. It's recap. Do it this way.
So I was a little worried that you might have to go out and find every single thing that might have a unmanaged solution component on it. But then I realized, so if I've got my one monolithic solution, or maybe I've got 4, if I just run it on that managed solution, it'll clean up anything that potentially could be overriding it, correct? So I don't have to worry about going and finding something that's not a part of my solution, like that's not affecting my managed solution, I guess is the way to talk about that, right? So I don't have to go out and find what are all the things that are unmanaged on my solution, and I just go, hey, here's my managed solution that I'm using. I want to make sure that it is not being overridden by anything unmanaged, and boom, you go, and depending how big it is, apparently you go to sleep and wake up the next day or whatever, huh?
Yeah, exactly. It will just try to run this SDK message on all of the components. If it fails to delete that, it will report it in the log, obviously. But yeah, well, if you have some components where you don't have any unmanaged layers, nothing will happen. Obviously, sometimes you try to delete unmanaged layer and the platform gives you the error because of whatever, right? It could be anything. So it will be also logged in the log that you have to sometimes manually fix dependencies. But for majority of components, you just bulk delete all of them.
Nice.
And that is very often a step, actually, which you have to do before you do the managed solution cleanup, right? So this kind of takes us to the next, to the second add-on I created, which is bulk managed deleting, right? And if you have unmanaged layers, unmanaged layer very often creates a dependency, and you can't delete the solution because you have unmanaged layers. So if you have a solution like ADX portal, right? All ADX with millions of fields entities. And if you have unmanaged layers there, then deleting this solution will be a pain always. So this is actually the first good step before the proper cleanup to delete all unmanaged layers, all active layers, which is the same thing. And then approach deleting.
Is there have you considered sort of giving like a report option? So, you could say report on all of my unmanaged customizations that have been, the active layer, so that I know what has happened. Because I think sometimes, I'm always a little bit reticent to just run something on an environment before I know what's going to happen. It's like a what if scenario type flag.
Yeah, it would be good, obviously, to extend it and do things like this. I just literally spend an evening writing the tool, so it's pretty simple.
If you come on the XRM Toolcast, you'll kind of understand that you will always leave either Daryl and I requesting things. So I do apologize in advance.
No, it's a very good idea. Well,
last episode, I got a taste of my own medicine with Jonas giving me everything to need to change in the early bound generator. Then Niraj created that meme online. That was pretty good too. I like that.
Yes, I saw that. Yeah. But it's interesting because that, like you say, the fact that the removing the active layer is the first step. So it does segue into your second tool. Is that the order that you kind of thought about these things? Did you think, oh well, I've got this? Do you think about it as a single problem, or do you see them as two discrete, separate problems, and you just have to run one first and the second one?
Sometimes it's a separate problem because it's not always that you have to delete managed solutions if you want to clean unmanaged layers for the reason I mentioned, right? So if you want to have nice import process without, some surprises, that something doesn't go through, so then you just clean. But the other part of the problem I also faced was bulk delete. So obviously, this one is actually kind of combined problem. I had it for one of my customers that it's 160 solutions that I had to delete from the instance, because when the instance was provisioned in the beginning, someone just ticked all boxes, just to be sure. And that resulted in massive Microsoft solutions, like little solutions, right? It's just like patch of a patch, and all of them are depending on each other, and it's very tough to delete them. It's very time consuming because you have to wait until one deletes. And I thought that there is actually something which does it in the XRM toolbox. I was surprised to see that it's actually not. I thought, well, that's actually the moment where I can contribute. So yeah, I wrote it literally just mainly in the beginning for my own benefits, and immediately published this once I realized it's not bad.
So you're talking primarily about getting rid of the first party sales, service, marketing, all of that kind of stuff.
It could be any. It could be also first party, but first party too. Yeah. So we had an instance which had all of the portals installed and all of the voice of customers, all of them deprecated, and a long history of a system and a lot of tables we don't need. So yeah, we decided to clean it. And yeah, when I made a quick analysis, what is the volume? It was 160. So usually don't have such number of that passing.
when I looked at how it does it, it's interesting because if anyone's had to do this task manually, they will immediately recognize the technique that your tool is doing, because what your tool is doing is it's automating what you would actually be doing manually, which is try and delete something. I've got some dependencies. Oh, okay, right. Move on to that. Oh, go and try and delete that one. Oh no, there's some dependencies there. Move on to that. Oh, I can delete that one. Great. Right. Go back to the beginning of the list, and kind of iterate over that process.
That's exactly.
It's not rocket science. Is that what you're saying, Scott?
No, it's definitely not rocket science. Well, theoretically, you have retrieve dependencies for an install request in SDK, which you theoretically call. Theoretically gives you the answer if the solution can be uninstalled or not. Right?
I love it. Theoretically, I know that
I'm waiting for the why.
It just doesn't work, right? It works in a sense that if your solution is like a primary owner of the component, it will show it as a dependency, but there are other dependencies which are due to layering, and this will not give you that list. So, obviously, firstly, the solution is querying all the solutions you selected, and then it checks for each if that could be deleted as per the SDK. And if SDK says yes, then it tries to delete it, and it iterates through all of them, which are simple and theoretically they can be deleted. And as you say, many of them fail because of, for example, unmanaged layer. And the solution is just trying to delete, and it's reattempting to delete after it deletes other, right? So, for example, if you delete the D365 marketing solution, you also have patches, right? And patch may have unmanaged layers. First, you clean layers, then you delete patches, and then one patch, then the other patch, then in the end, you hopefully delete Dynamics 365 marketing solution. Obviously, the reality is that usually somewhere in the middle, you open ticket with Microsoft. And then they tell you can't open one because you have to open 5. And then you go with Microsoft to fix some known bugs, right? And apply remediation scripts. Because, that's worth mentioning actually, because it's not that, if the tool doesn't delete all of the solutions, it doesn't mean that there's a problem with the tool, but there's a lot of problems with first-party solutions, which are known to Microsoft, and it's just enough to open the ticket, and they have ready scripts to mitigate it. The problem is they want separate ticket for every instance. Stuff like that. So it usually is not that quick operation, but at least you don't have to spend the night clicking delete and making notes.
If I don't have to do anything, I can do an infinite amount of that, just so you know. So, yes. Once I click the button, I don't have to do anything. I can do an infinite amount of that. So.
We will be still needed, consultants. So it's not going to replace us.
Just to click the button and wait. Well, it's an interesting topic because, like you say, with the complexity of all of those solutions, there's so many, and I've stopped actually looking at them now. There was a period of my life where I was really sort of interested in what solutions were going in and looking at all the different dependencies and patches and layers, but maybe I'm just old. Maybe I've got old and I can't just hold it all in my head now, but it became too complicated to understand the cross references between all these different layers and what they kind of did and what functionality they added and why they were there in the first place,
That's true. There's a lot of deprecations, a lot of functionality which is taken over by some other solutions, and Microsoft is moving this. And I think, the support is also a bit confused. And obviously, when I was having this task of deleting so many solutions, first thing I did was opening a ticket and asking if Microsoft can possibly do it if it's first party. I'll just clean active layers and they will do the rest. But they say no, we can give you a sequence, right? And obviously, the sequence didn't work. So that's why I created this script, which actually tries and catches, reprocesses, because otherwise, that's the only way to do it, literally. At least now.
And keep track of what you've already tried and what you need to try.
Exactly.
And the next one to try.
And then when you get to the path where actually everything fails, then it stops and says what the problems. And then you copy and paste it to the Microsoft ticket. And you have 3 weeks off.
Wow, that's man, I can't. What did I? Was it sales I removed, or maybe it was marketing? But that one big Microsoft solution I went through, and I was like, oh, this will take me a couple of hours. No, it was a couple of days. It was a couple solid days of like, no, not this one. Okay, not this one. Okay, why not this one? This one's good. Wait, no, it's not good. Why isn't it good? And like, it just, I was like, oh, are you serious? Are you serious? But finally, I did get it to the point that I could actually do what I needed to do. So, but man, it was painful. So,
and especially when you think about that when you combine it with the unmanaged, with the active layer, I find the most common one is where someone has created a copy of a form. So they've opened up a form and they've saved a form, and that form has got maybe a field from marketing in it. So they think that they've created a component that's somehow disconnected from the managed layer, because they've created a copy, so it's not like they're editing the out of the box form, but that copy is referencing something that, and then preventing it from being deleted. So in that kind of scenario, presumably if you ran the unmanaged, the active layer deleter, then that would delete the form. Was that?
Well, no. So this active layer deleting tool is not deleting components which only have an unmanaged layer, right? So it's not deleting things which you just created just for safety. Well, plus there is a different way to do it, right? Because you wouldn't do it through SDK deleting the layer, you just delete the component. So no, I'm not doing it this way. It's only when you create active layer on something existing.
So in that scenario, if you ran the bulk delete tool, it would then not manage. It would eventually say, would it give you any information on, say, oh, it's this form that is preventing me from deleting, or would it just say, I tried, sorry, you're gonna have to, go and look into it a little bit more?
The active layer deleter, I think it will leave a note in red in the log, but mainly the second solution when you delete the second add-on, when you delete solutions, it will fail and it will tell you why. And it will give you the error saying that there is a dependency and give you GUIDs of your form. Things like forms are actually quite simple to track because you can use this UI dependency checking, so it's easy to get that. It's mainly problems are coming from, well, also from forms, yeah, but from components where it's not so obvious. Right? Yeah. Basically, when you delete the solution and you get the error, this error is usually the most useful, telling you what actually failed. There is no easy way in the platform to dig this information before. You can, and I did an attempt, actually, there was a completely different version of it when I started to write it. And it was working, but wasn't covering all of the solutions. So it was scanning through all of the layers and trying to conclude from it, but it's not possible to cover every scenario here. And you would redo a lot of stuff that actually Microsoft did with this retrieve dependencies for an install request. So I decided to actually use this one. And then if it fails, it failed. I'm just logging it failed, and then I'm reprocessing when I think I don't think bad, right? I just reiterate through the queue and try to delete what wasn't deleted after the previous deletions.
I'd love to see that UI, that dependency reporting UI, get a little bit better, a little bit more comprehensive. I mean, it's obviously hugely better than it used to be, right? It's infinitely better than we had, but I'd love to see it increase in detail in terms of, showing you what that dependency tree is. And I mean, obviously it's a difficult problem to solve, but I know I've also noticed other dependencies being added into the solutions. Like, for example, now if you've got a PCF component in a Canvas app, it adds in a dependency now, so you can't delete the PCF component without removing the Canvas app. So, there's two parts to it. They're actually adding in more dependency checking, but also trying to improve the UI that shows you those dependencies. So I guess it's like trying to hit a moving target from the UI folk.
Yeah, that's true.
Keep adding more things under the covers. They haven't got the UI yet, so they need to catch up on the UI all the time. Yeah, I can see that happening quite a bit.
Yeah, which is why I think sometimes the brute force technique that you're using is always that's always the fallback position, because you know that you could just
Otherwise, you would need to parse all of those XMLs and all those JSONs the platform is holding in each layer, and you need to make a sense out of it, and they will change it very often, and you need to adjust your tool to do it. So I'd say not to do it. Instead, when we are relying on the SDK doing this basic check, it checks a lot, right? So it's a nice help, and then the rest is just brute force. It's just
You can't get over brute force sometimes. Sometimes it's just like the other thing that I find is when you have a really good error message or really good thing to help you solve a problem, it's usually because somebody else has already had the problem and then they created that for themselves. Like even last episode, Jonas was talking about, hey, in this like debug option, like attach debugger, it kept on saying waiting and waiting and waiting. And I'm like, yeah, because I forgot I had it clicked and I sat there and I waited and nothing happened. And so I put in that message of it's waiting because I shot myself in the foot. I was like, why isn't this working? And I was like, oh yeah. So those little things of you see things sometimes like, well, that's kind of weird, or that's different, or that's unusual, or whatever. But I think I'm sure that those error messages that they're spitting out, like they've ran into that, like, dang it, we need a better way of figuring out what it is that's causing the issue. And then we get the benefit from it when we cause the same issue or need to have this information. So it's kind of funny how that all works.
So have you got any plans to add some more? Is there like a backlog of features and things that you're wanting to add? Because you're obviously very, very busy doing all your other things, and these things take time. And I think a lot of the time people don't appreciate actually how much people, when they write XRM Toolbox tools, how much of their time they're really giving. Because it's not something that's just quick, is it? You've got to
especially the first stuff. Stuff you have to create it in your own style, and then you just fill it in with logic. For this one, I know there is one back with this unmanaged layer remover for workflows, which I need to fix. So that's the short-term backlog. But I'm not having it. If I hear something back and someone, like you did today, then it could be a good idea to work with some features. But so far I didn't hear a lot. So I probably will just leave it as it is if it works and focus on other stuff.
I'll give you one thing you can change is clicking on the column headers in your grid doesn't sort the columns. So you need to add in that event handler and fix that. That's like both your tools have the same issue where they don't. I want them to be sortable. I want to be able to sort by friendly name or by managed or whatever. There you go. Merry Christmas. There's work for you.
Yeah, let's leave it, to some colder months.
And now you have to say thank you, Daryl, for your feedback. I appreciate it, and just sort of now just move on quickly, otherwise they'll keep coming.
But yeah, I'm having some also other Dynamics open source plans. I created a platform for custom Dynamics portals based on Umbraco framework, talking directly to Dynamics, and I intend to open source it soon. It will be also, software as a service as it is now, but it will also be open source. So hopefully there will be some benefit to the community. It's not XRM Toolbox directly related, but it requires some time, especially to create nice Azure templates to deploy quickly.
That sounds amazing. I mean, I did see it. I did have a little bit of a poke around your GitHub repository, so I did see Umbraco in there is in a fork. So I was going to ask about that actually. So that was quite good. I mean, Umbraco is amazing. It's like as a CMS. It's been around for a long time, and gone through so many different cycles and been updated to use sort of ASP.NET and. So have you added in a way of presenting data from Dataverse like Portals does? Is that or is it more of a kind of a separate layer that then can interact in the back end?
No, so basically the foundation for the idea was that I don't necessarily love current portals. They are great solutions, but for a very specific use case. They are not CMSs, right? That's the main problem I always had with it. And I love Umbraco, as you say, right? It's from 2003, I think they started, so it's very major software, and it's open source, and it's MIT. So what actually my platform, Extendable, is called, what it does is, it can show you the data from Dynamics. It allows you to create forms, to send the data back to Dynamics. And it's not directly sitting on Dynamics, right? Because it's a separate thing. It's basically a separate application which only feeds the data, right? It just queries the data from Dynamics, and you can query from Dynamics on the fly. And you can directly from Dataverse through the API. You could also use the SQL for those who still use DES. Deprecated, so change approach there. But yeah, it allows you to show the data. It allows users to log in, to have custom pages for them, to filter based on people owning some records, like simple stuff like invoices or quotes or whatever. And you can submit data to Dynamics. So you have a drag and drop experience for creating forms, plus all this nice stuff that you get from Umbraco always, right? So you have proper CMS with caching, with very, very fast, for some static content. Static in a sense that's from database, but basically it's not from Dynamics. And you can extend it. You just write your C#, you write your JavaScript, and you have whatever you want there with no limitations, with no sandbox in reality, right? Because every app lives in a separate app service in Azure, so you don't have limits like this.
Very cool. I look forward to seeing that.
When will that be? When will that be released?
Well, the application itself is already released, so yeah, it's just there are some demos on the website. It's called extendable.com. But so far it was like closed thing, only software as a service. But I think I will open source it soon. So I'm just making some changes to make it deployable without knowing the software, basically making it a bit more adoptable for devs.
Well, we'll have to get the links for that and share it in our show notes. Definitely.
Yeah, because if anyone's doing any existing Umbraco work and working with Dynamics, I can imagine they'll be very, very interested in that. And Umbraco is so widely used. It seems to be everywhere. Even if it's not publicized, you dig a little bit deeper and you go, hang on a minute, this is Umbraco under the covers. So. Yeah, and with the popularity of Dataverse going, increasing, then yeah, exciting stuff.
Yeah, it looks very good, and you don't have to have. You can onboard more users to work at your portal than actually people in Dynamics, because sometimes you only want part of your website is literally about data from Dynamics, data to Dynamics, but the rest is just people publishing content, not necessarily working there. So you just can have as many users as you want without licensing stuff, like without visits per day, per whatever, like we have with Dynamics. It can turn to be very expensive very quickly. But in here we don't have this problem, right? You're just having your dedicated app service slot, and you just utilize it.
Yeah, definitely. Interesting. So, what's your thoughts? Have you been following the Power Pages announcements from Microsoft Build?
Well, I didn't check the latest build yet. To be fair, didn't have time to do it yet. Yeah, well, I was mainly having projects in the past with old ADX, now no longer ADX, but we know the history. So yeah, mainly this portal was already part of the project, or I was asked to actually go with this one. So this is what I mostly did in terms of portals sitting on Microsoft. I didn't do any more modern, but They are still not CMS, right? As far as I familiarize myself with them, so they are not having this big portion of functionality which comes with Umbraco, right? They are covering a bit different scenario.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, Maciej, is there anything else that we need to cover? Anything else you want to share? Anything else that's come down the pipe, or anything you could think of before we switch over to saying goodbye?
No, I'm good. Yeah, thank you for invitation. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. How can our listeners get a hold of you if they want to more about your Umbraco extension, or if they want to give you more tools that they want to see you kind of create or extend? How can they get a hold of you?
LinkedIn, Twitter, I'm almost everywhere. So when you type my name, it's probably going to be me.
All right. There's sometimes I have names that I assume they're unique, and I'm like, oh, this isn't unique at all. There's like 500,000 people with this name. I just never heard of it before. So, but yes, I was fairly easy to find you on the interwebs. Like, yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, that's good. So, Scott, that's how our listeners can get hold of our guests. How can our listeners get a hold of us?
Well, Daryl, yes, you can email us at cast@xrmtoolbox.com, or you can get hold of us on Twitter, social media at xrmtoolcast. And yeah, we'd be very, very pleased to hear from you. And if you want to let us know about any stories that we're going to share in our up-and-coming war stories. That's still a plan, right?
Yes, that's still a plan. That's probably next week here. So
yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we still love to hear from you.
Yep. Awesome. All right. Well, Maciej, thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your tools. And next time I get on a site where someone clicked to install everything and I have to clean up the environment, I will definitely be thanking you as I go to bed after I've clicked the button and let the tool run, right?
Yeah, I look forward to being able to just click the button and go to bed. I mean, that seems like the ideal scenario for me. So let's just end on that thought. But it's been it's been an absolute pleasure, Maciej, really. And I'm definitely going to check out your Umbraco extendable project as well. So thank you for sharing that.
Cool, thank you. Thanks for the invitation.
All right. No problem. Talk later. Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
This has been the XRM Toolcast with Daryl Labar and Scott Durrell. Produced by Lynn Zawin. If you have any questions or suggestions, please send them to cast@xrmtoolbox.com, tweet @XRM Toolcast, or hit us up on our LinkedIn XRM Toolcast page.